there, ref. That she got the ball. Good afternoon, Tottenham fans, and welcome back to the Irish Hotspur with your host, Dave. Just when you thought Tottenham's transfer window was done, last night they shocked us all by announcing the signing of 17-year-old Irish Wonderkid Mason Melia from St. Patrick's Athletic. The deal has smashed the League of Ireland transfer record with an initial 1.9 million plus add-ons that could bring the total to 4 million euros. Melia was in London on Tuesday evening to finalise his move to Spurs, but due to Brexit regulations, he won't be able to officially join the club until his 18th birthday, which is September the 22nd, which is after the summer transfer window, which then means he won't be able to officially join until January 2026. Now, since the deal was announced, I've had a ton of people reaching out to me, asking me what I know about Melia. I know a little bit. If you follow Irish football, you've probably heard of the name a lot already. But I actually wanted to bring in someone much more qualified to talk about him. So today I've got a special guest for you all. Conor McAvoy. He's an expert on Irish football and a very knowledgeable fan. Conor runs the Republic of Ireland Player Tracker Twitter account, keeping everyone up to date on Irish players' moves in the transfer window and tracking the progress of every Irish player around the world. Conor, thank you very much for your time this afternoon, my man. How are you keeping?
I'm great. Thanks very much for having me on. It's been a hectic last week and a half, really, from an Irish point of view. Maybe Spurs, actually, for Spurs in general, it's been a bit hectic. Don't know what's going to happen with your club, but it's good to be on now, and thanks for having me on. I'm delighted to be here.
I'm a huge fan of your work. You know, I've followed your Twitter page for quite some time, and you do a great job keeping everybody up to date on Irish players. And we've got quite a few Irish followers over here, so I do recommend you getting over and checking out Conor's work. Also, he does a podcast called Lansdowne Road, keeping people up to date on there about Irish players abroad as well. So make sure you get over and check that out. But Conor, let's get straight into it. Mason Melia comes with a huge reputation and a lot of hype for a 17-year-old. There was a lot of competition for his signature, with Spurs having to beat out the likes of Man City, Chelsea, Everton, Celtic and Bayer Leverkusen. Can you explain why there's so much hype around him and why he's attracted such interest from top clubs?
I think it's just something as simple as I say to people, he's the best 16-year-old we've ever seen play in the League of Ireland. He's been a freak. It's been like we've seen Ferguson come through, play a couple of games for Bows here and there in the League of Ireland. But what Mason Melia has done has took it to another level. He's been the first choice number 9 now for the last, I would say, from the second half of the season on, he became first choice. Like, he's had competition there now with Aidan Keena, who is he's a very good striker. Spurs fans wouldn't be aware of him, but in the League of Ireland context, he's a very good striker. And what he's done over the last, he's always been a big name in Irish circles since he ever really came through at Ireland underage. He always seems to be scoring hat-tricks every other game. He's just a complete number 9 for what his age is. Like, he's not built like, for example, Evan Ferguson would be built like he was built like a man as a 16-year-old. Melia's not like that, but for somehow he's just blended the men's football perfectly. Already looks one of the best number 9s in the league, which is so impressive. Was playing in Europe every week with St. Pat's. They got to the last round of qualifying, and like they were up against Istanbul Başakşehir, who aren't like, they wouldn't be a Premier League quality team, but they'd be a very, very decent European side. And he tore them apart. Really, the way he just plays with his back to goal up against big defenders, 6'4", 6'5", grown men, and he's a kid, like, at the end of the day. And what he's done as a kid, you could argue probably in terms of 16, 17-year-old strikers in Europe at the moment, he's up there probably as the best, because when you really have a 16 or like, he started playing when he was 15, that broke through into men's football, especially with the League of Ireland. They can be quite reserved with bringing some young lads through, because it's a very physical league. It's very demanding on a young lad. Easily could get hurt. And what he's done over the last year and a half has been absolutely remarkable, to be honest with you. And it's an unbelievable signing for Spurs.
He's definitely had a remarkable rise, and you know, I've watched a bit of him. I think he's a very good striker. His hold-up play, I think, is absolutely phenomenal. But just quickly, you know, many people would say, well, if he's such a talent, you know, why hasn't he been fast-tracked into the Republic of Ireland squad? Could you maybe give a bit of background around that?
I think it's just simple as that we actually, as poor as we've been over the last couple of years of strikers, we actually have a good crop of strikers, and I probably wouldn't say there's any need to really rush him into the squad. Like, he was called up actually for the first time to the 21s in in November, but he had a back issue, which probably delayed the transfer to Spurs being announced. And he only returned actually to full fitness there last week. He didn't play any preseason games, but in terms of back to full fitness, getting all clear, he's back now. But I think it's just the fact we have Evan Ferguson, obviously Troy Parrott, Adamida, Tom Cannon. We have a very, very good actually crop of strikers in international football terms. Like, you can't compare it to England really, but if for Irish context, there's no real need to rush a lad like Mason Melia. Maybe if this was 4 years ago, do you remember when Troy Parrott was kind of back into the first team? That's because we just didn't have young players coming through, and we needed to get these players coming through. But thankfully, it probably takes a bit more pressure off Mason's shoulders that we're not fast tracking him into the senior squad. That hopefully when he goes to Spurs and breaks through at Spurs or wherever he goes on loan, that he can be blended in then. But thankfully, I think it's a positive thing that we're not going to have to rush him into the first team. Obviously, you want your young lads coming through as soon as possible, but I don't think there's any mad panic, and we can let him develop at club level and develop now. He'll be a huge part of the Ireland under-19s who have their elite qualifiers in March, and then from there he'll go back into the under-21 setup.
I agree with that, and I think people have to understand, the age of some of the strikers that you mentioned there as well. They're early 20s, there's no need to fast track him in right now, and I think it is good to let him go into the under-21s and sort of develop naturally. I also want to ask, I believe he had a brief stint with Man City in 2023 on trial. Why didn't that quite work out for him at Man City?
He actually turned down a deal with Man City. He was offered.
Okay.
Man City wanted to sign him, but because of Brexit regulations, obviously he wouldn't have been able to join in time, and they wanted to send him to their affiliate club in Belgium, Lommel SK, I believe you call them, which is quite a common thing they would do with young talents and then bring them back at 18. But I think that Mason himself rather the route of staying at home and playing every week in the League of Ireland and developing in there, and then assess his options for now, which obviously he chose Spurs over everyone else. But I think it was just a thing. He wanted to stay at home and play every week in the League of Ireland, and probably the best environment for him because he knows where he's playing. We can see that how well thought of he's at home, and it's not like he's going well out of his comfort zone to adapt to men's football. He's doing it in an environment that he has continued to thrive in. So I think it was just a simple case that he just didn't want to go to Belgium and play there for a couple of years. He felt his best option for his development was to stay at home, and he's been proved right.
Do you know what? I respect that actually quite a lot, because a lot of players get blinded by the name, the big contracts, and I like the fact that he's took his own individual development and kept it in his own hand rather than just make that move, because we've seen many Irish players down the years make the move to these big clubs and you never really hear from them once again really after them moves, or they never end up making it and they have to sort of rebuild their career and go a long way about it. So I actually like that from Mason Melia. How would you describe Mason Melia's playing style, and what type of striker is Tottenham getting?
I think the first thing I'd say is he's very, for a 17-year-old, he's what you'd consider probably the most complete 17-year-old striker you're going to see in terms of hold-up play. I'm sure as you've seen him, his hold-up play and his ability to fend off defenders and use his body and his football IQ is on another level for what you'd see at that age, because you see him fending off the defenders, getting his back into them. Winning free kicks is one thing that I think you would know with Harry Kane when he was at Spurs. He was unbelievable at getting his back in defenders and knowing when to go to ground to win free kicks. And in terms of like, maybe he's not lightning quick, but what we've seen in modern football, when do you really have a striker that's the main thing is running in behind on the things? So he's a very technically gifted striker who knows his football brain is brilliant. He can drop deep, pick up the ball, and he can drive. He drives at the ball. He likes to pick up the ball and run a good bit. But it's not like he's running in behind. So, but I would like to think he's very Troy Parrott-esque, very Harry Kane-esque in terms of they like to drop deep, pick up the ball, make things happen. They want to be involved heavily in the build-up play. They know a football brain is one of their highest attributes, and obviously he scores goals. So I think he really is what you really want in a modern number 9, which is the perfect thing. Obviously, he's still young and he's a long way to go, but for a 17-year-old, he's as good as it gets in that context.
I think many people agree with you. I think a lot of Spurs fans have gone to watch the highlight reels, and one thing for me that I noticed when he's playing with St. Pat's, and especially when you see it broken down into the highlight reels, is actually his hold-up play. Like you said, it is very similar to Harry Kane to a degree, but what I love is the way he can also use his body push off them, get turned and run at them and be very, very direct. And I think one that will excite a lot of Tottenham fans in terms of how he plays. Like you said, he likes to get involved in the build-up plays, not one of them that likes to run in off the shoulder last defender and just be that sort of goal poacher. He likes to get on the ball and play. And boy, Kenny, that's for sure. Let me ask you, Connor, what strengths does Melia bring to the table and what areas of his game do you think he can still develop?
I think it's just you probably would say physicality in terms of maybe athleticism is obviously something that any player could really work on at that age. And as good as he is physically, he is still very slight in terms of context of men's football. Obviously his goal record is good. He scored 10 goals in the League of Ireland, I believe it is. So obviously he could still work on them numbers. Obviously it is a very tough league to score goals in. A lot of players would probably think because it's the League of Ireland score goals, but in terms of a lot of it is you have to get goals for yourself, or you'd have to be put in a good position. So obviously I do think for a 17-year-old you would say he is a very complete all-round striker, but I don't want to say too much because he's still very young. But I do think it's just what he's currently good at is just it's just staying at what he's doing at and completely developing at that and just keep going to another level. And as he steps up the levels, just keep that going at the same rate that he's going, because there's no real that I can look at Melia and be like, no, he can't do that. He's like a lot of footballers you'd see with that sort of level that they lack the football brain, but he has that as one of his strongest attributes. So I just think he needs to just keep going at the rate that he's going at. And if he continues to go at that, it's going to be hard to stop him, because he seems to be there as a footballer, and he seems to have the right people around him, and he seems to knows what he needs to do to get to the next level.
And you know what? I think he's actually coming to the right club in terms of, developing the kid, because you look at the way Tottenham have been lately, a lot of the youth recruitment, some of the players that were already developing, the likes of Archie Gray, Bergvall, but also take you back to the day, the likes of Walker, Rose, Lennon, Bale, players like that we signed very young, brought to Tottenham Hotspur and developed them. So I think he's come to the right club in that sort of context, especially when you look at a lot of the clubs now and the way Tottenham Hotspur seem to be going, which is signing a lot of young players and looking to develop them and build that cohesive team for the future. I think he's definitely come to the right spot there in terms of a Premier League move. But, Connor, every Tottenham fan will want to know, how do you see Melia's potential stacking up against former Tottenham striker Troy Parrott? Does he have more potential to make it at Tottenham Hotspur than what Troy did?
Yeah, I think so, because I believe the plan actually is for him to go straight into the first team at Spurs, which shows how highly they think of him. Because but obviously that's just the plan at the moment, and it will mainly depend on how he does this season in the League of Ireland. If he continues to go at the rate he's going at, because it's expected that he'll have an even better season this year, being a year older and a year more physically developed. But I think that's the current plan. So, and with Troy Parrott, obviously he came in as a 16-year-old, wasn't ready for men's football, still a long way to go. But as we've seen with Troy Parrott at the time, Troy was physically and technically absolutely superb. He was one of the best 16, 17-year-olds in Europe at the time. If you remember what he done in the under 17-year-olds, playing in the age group up, he done the same for Spurs in the Youth League in Premier League 2. So it's hard to compare in that sense when you look back at Troy at the moment. But because Troy was so good at that age, that it's hard to say that he was that much better than Troy Parrott was, or to say he was worse than Troy Parrott was, is hard. But I do think in the long-term development in terms of Mason Melia's game, he's more of a Premier League striker as such, because he's a lot more physically equipped for it and likes the physical battle a lot more than Troy Parrott would. In that sense, Troy Parrott likes to drop deep a lot, likes to play as a false nine as such. So I would say Mason Melia is a lot more likely to make it at Spurs.
Do you know what? I'd agree with that. I think, with your assessment between Troy Parrott and Melia there, I just think Melia, the fact that he can hold up the ball even with 6 foot plus centre backs behind him, I think it actually gives him a much better chance to make it at Tottenham Hotspur, because I do think he's a little bit more well-rounded than what Troy Parrott was at that age in terms of his all-round game. But interesting you said there, the plan is for him to walk straight into Tottenham's first team. I mean, many Spurs fans were expecting him to come into the academy and then maybe head out on loan.
Yeah, it's because I would have thought the same, because he was announced as an academy sign as such. Maybe that was just to maybe release a bit of pressure off his shoulders, not to put a heavy burden on him, because he's a huge year ahead, because he doesn't join for literally another year. So, but no, the plan is at the moment, from what I believe and what I've been told from very reputable people, that he's plan for the club is to get him straight into the first team and get him developed in there, whether that is just training every day with the first team or straight into the squads on match day squads or but like I wouldn't be surprised at all to see him go to Spurs in January and they loan him out to a championship side or a top European like league side at the end of the month after that. But the plan is first team at the moment, but obviously it's too hard to tell yet because Mason Melia is that highly thought of because there's very little lads across Europe his age are doing what he's doing. And there's a reason there was a battle for him. And I'd imagine that first team involvement is a big thing that was made the decision making here for going to Spurs because he could easily have went to Celtic. And obviously Celtic, as you know, with Irish lads over the last couple of years have had a terrible success rate. But it's a lot easier in terms of talent-wise that he could go into Celtic and break through there. So obviously I'd imagine there's been promises made. Obviously it's hard with verbal promises, but I do think he will probably. I don't think 21s football really is an option for Melia anymore because, like when Troy Parrott went in, he wasn't ready for men's football. Mason Melia started playing men's football really regularly every week when Troy Parrott joined Spurs. So it kind of shows in terms of physical development. Obviously, technical, Troy Parrott was absolutely unbelievable at that age, but physically and ready for men's football, Mason Melia has been for the last year and a half, and we'll get another year of men's football now this year of being number 1, number 9, and he could possibly be the best number 9 in the league, which is it's a very realistic thing to happen. So I don't think going back and playing men or 21s football really would benefit Mason Melia at all. Maybe if it was a couple of games just to get up to speed with the Spurs style of play and he was training with the first team. But I think I'd imagine it's either straight into the first team and compete with the likes of Solanke for a spot in the squad, which will be extremely hard. He's not going to be first choice, but or go out and loan to a championship side or wherever they see fit across Europe.
Very interesting that you say that because brought in Leo Feliz from the Argentinian league, and he played a small bit of under 21 football and then went straight out on loan to Spain for 2 previous years. But with Mason Melia, I agree with you. I don't think he will accept coming over here and going into the under 21s and playing academy football because actually, I've heard a lot of Irish players do podcasts and stuff like that where they speak about getting their move to the Premier League. There was one guy at Crystal Palace and, he couldn't wait to get back to the League of Ireland on loan because he wants to get back out and play men's football. Coming in and playing academy football, they do see it as a bit of a step down and nowhere near as intense, and they do struggle with it to a large degree. So it'll be very interesting to see what Tottenham do with Mason Melia, but very interesting that you said that he's expected to walk into the first team environment. I think that will shock many Tottenham fans. But let me ask, we've mentioned about the interest of Man City, Chelsea, Everton, Bayer Leverkusen, Celtic. How did Tottenham end up winning the race for his signature, considering the interest from the top clubs like we've mentioned there? And do you think that maybe Josh Keeley played a bit of a role in his decision?
I'm not sure if Josh Keeley played any role in this transfer at all, really, to be honest, because I know when Mason went over to visit, was it Chelsea who's played when he was the guest at the game? I don't believe there was anything made of. I don't think Josh was made aware of that happening, or Josh was asked to have a word with them, because which I thought would have naturally probably would have got him to do, because Mason played with Josh's brother Conor Keeley at St. Pat's last season. So I thought naturally that would have been something to happen, but I don't believe Josh has actually had to play much of a role of it, which I think is probably a good thing, because you shouldn't really be, if you're a club like Spurs, you shouldn't be relying on Josh Keeley to convince Mason Melia to sign for Spurs. So I'd imagine it's just been down to they put in the hard graft years with Melia, sold a very good development plan to him, how they're going to bring him into the first team. I'd like to think money wasn't really a motivator here, because all clubs could offer Mason Melia good money, and it's not really a thing. And I believe he's one of his agents is his uncle. So like when your family's representing you, you're like the best of your footballing career before thinking of puppets, as we've seen a lot of unfortunate lads in Irish football over the last couple of years. But so I think it's just been the mixture of development plan. Obviously his family would have been sorted out well from this deal. So I'd like to think that Josh Keeley, from what I was told, Josh Keeley had no real involvement in this at all, which is obviously, I look at a lot of people might think it's a bad thing that Josh Keeley hasn't been involved in this, but I think it's a good thing, because it shows that you've not needed to go to a lad and say, oh, can you have a word with him to convince him? Which I don't think there's anything wrong with that, but it shows that Spurs have really went out of their way to get this deal done, because they've beat competition from all the top Premier League clubs for this lad who really is a talent. Like,
well, we've done very well to get Melia's signature. A lot of clubs have been inviting him around, bringing him to games, trying to get a deal done with him. So Tottenham have done very well in that regard. Maybe, look, we'll just end off on just a quick little bit on Josh Keeley. I think many Spurs fans will want to know what you think his sort of career holds. Do you think he will make it at Tottenham Hotspur? How do you think he's developing since he's joined from St. Pat's?
Yeah, I to be honest, I absolutely love Josh Keeley. I think he's an unbelievable goalkeeper, and he's a lovely fella as well, which always helps. And the where he's gone from, like, I believe when if he first joined Spurs, he was meant to go in as a number 2 at the 21s, which I don't think he knew at the time, but he was meant to go in the number 2, and then he was 7th under 19 Ireland, which is, he went from 7 choice to being number 1 for the 21s in the space of 2.5 years, which shows the development rate he's had since he's joined Spurs has been absolutely unbelievable. And like, when Josh really first came over, I didn't know what was going to be the long-term future with him in England, because you never know what happens, but he's gone to another level, and his loan at Barnet was a great learning curve for him, because he went to an environment that's very, very hard to a goalkeeper to play in. And since he's broke through at Leyton Orient into the first team, he's been absolutely unbelievable. A very serious argument could be made that he's the best goalkeeper in League One at the moment. What he does with the ball at his feet and his shot stopping is outrageous. And I think long-term, Josh Keeley, whether he makes it Spurs, I don't know, because I don't think Josh Keeley will want to sit about and wait for a chance, because I think he'd easily go back to Spurs next season, be number 2 or number 3 or whatever way. But I don't think Josh Keeley would want to be sitting out, because I know his aspirations are to play for Ireland. And with the level of goalkeepers we have, sitting about waiting for a chance to Spurs won't get him that. And what he's like, the development that he's done over the last year or two, like scoring that goal in the FA Cup, I will always say, has turned Leyton Orient's season around. That last minute equaliser, like, Leyton Orient were in the relegation zone fighting for their lives, and ever since I think they've won, I believe, is it 14? They've won 14 games unbeaten, and they've won 14 out of 19 games that Josh Keeley's played, and he's the most clean sheets in the league, and he's played a lot less games than some of them keepers, because he didn't start the season off with them. And he's turned their whole season around by one moment. And obviously the penalty saves, they play Man City at the weekend in the Cup, which will be good to see him test himself against Premier League clubs. And I believe there's some top European clubs that have been out to watch Josh play regularly. So I think it's the type of situation that, as much as Spurs will probably want to keep him in the end, Josh himself just will want to go play football, and he'll want to be playing for, I think he can easily become a Premier League goalkeeper in the future. I don't want to put any pressure on him, but at his current development rate as a 21-year-old, it's gonna be huge for Josh. And unfortunately for us, I don't think it'll get Spurs, due to the fact that you said Kinski and Vicario's there, and would the club want to bring Josh back if you've already invested a lot of money into a young keeper, and like for PSR rates and stuff like that? Would Josh be looked at as an asset to sell over the next couple of years? I probably would believe that will be the case.
Yeah, I think the signing of Antonin Kinski maybe put a little bit of a dent in Josh Keeley making the Tottenham senior team in future, which is quite sad, actually, because, I watched all the under-21 games and I thought he was very, very good for the under-21s. He was absolutely brilliant. Then I followed him out at Barnet. Got off to a bit of a rough start. He had a very good season. And then this year, he's absolutely been phenomenal for Leyton Orient as well, with young Jamie Donnelly there as well from Tottenham Hotspur. But I am concerned maybe Kinski might even fast track Josh Keeley's decision maybe to leave Tottenham Hotspur in the near future, especially if any of them top European clubs or European clubs that you're talking about interested in him decide to come in and make Tottenham an offer. But Connor, I want to say thank you very much. I think Spurs fans would have got a lot of value out of this. I think, listening to what you have to say about Mason Melia and Josh Keeley, actually, giving them an insight into what to expect and stuff like that. So I want to say a massive thank you very much on behalf of the Spurs fan base for your time this afternoon. And look, we do have quite a few Irish followers over here, so tell them where they can find you.
You can find me on all platforms, really. Republic of Ireland Player Tracker, or Rep Tracker as it's betterly known. So you can find me on them, and on YouTube with Lansdowne Road, or Lansdowne Roar, sometimes it's known as, the podcast, which is an in-depth look at all things Irish football, which seems to go down a treat with Irish fans at the moment. So even if you want to learn a bit more about Irish football and you're not Irish, or few insights, you can check me over there. So it's been great to be on. Thank you very much for having me on. I've really enjoyed this chat.
No, thank you very much. You've been absolutely brilliant, my man. Thank you very much. Tottenham fans, get your comments below. Make sure you run the likes on this as well. That'll be absolutely brilliant. And I'll see you back here later on. As always, come on, you Spurs.